Okay, in the 1990s, 94 I think, I went to work for the Voice of America. No, maybe it was later, maybe it was 98. I went to work for the Voice of America, which is basically a government-run news service that goes all over the world. Kevin Close, who went on to run the NPR, invited me down, and I had never heard of Voice of America. Most Americans haven't, because under the Smith Act, we're not even allowed to listen to it. But the way Voice of America worked was it sent news and information, in those days, behind the Iron Curtain, so people in communist countries could get information. And the way they did it was they had these radio signals, and they bounced them off the ionosphere, and then they came back over the Soviet Union or China or North Korea, and it was shortwave radio. I mean, I kind of heard of shortwave radio probably when I was in the Cub Scouts, but I didn't know anything about shortwave radio, but that's how they broadcast. And we went to see some of their transmission stations. They're giant farms of huge antenna that sent these massive signals up and bounced them down, and then people in Russia, theoretically, or the Eastern European bloc, or China, or North Korea, they had, in theory, they had shortwave radios where they could tune the thing in. Well, I was working for these guys, and I thought, I'll get a shortwave radio. So I bought a shortwave radio, and let me tell you, it was a pretty cool thing, you know. You'd sit there in the middle of the night, because the signal, for some reason, came in better at night than the daytime. It had something to do with sunspots. And you'd sit there, and you kind of go like this, and you'd find all these, and if you remember, if you're old enough, and you probably aren't, they had on these really old radios, it would say, like, Moscow, London, Beijing, Tokyo, and you could actually screw around with the dials, and you could bring in all these stations. There was something very cool about the whole thing. Well, it turns out that I found this site called Radio Garden, which is someplace in the Netherlands, and it does pretty much the same thing. I'm going to show you in a second. It's like Google Earth, except instead of looking at real estate, which Lisa and I do all the time, it gives
lets you tune into radio stations based on a world map. So here's it's going to be backward, of course. But here's the Radio Garden site, and right now I happen to be on Radio Krasnoyarsk, which is in the middle of Siberia. I think this is where they launched all their missiles and space stuff from. I mean, this is really the middle of nowhere, and so, you know, if you want to, there you go. Not that I speak a word of Russian, but you can listen to Radio Krasnoyarsk. Now, you can take the thing down in size, just like you do with Google Earth, over here, and there's the whole planet, see? And you can just spin the globe, and you can go to any radio station anywhere in the world just by taking the thing and moving it around. So, well, okay. So there's Krasnoyarsk, and lost it. Now I'm on Nizhneudinsk in Russia, whatever that is. Terrible music they have there. Oh, let's go back the other way. Okay. But if I drag the little thing over, oh God, it's awful trying to do this with one hand while I'm doing this. So here we can search Perm, which I think was Soviet gulags. There we go. There's Salakard radio. Salakard in the middle of Siberia. I think this is what prisoners in the Gulag used to listen to. Anyway, it's a cool thing. And it amazes me that no one has done this before, because the stuff is all out there, and to make it searchable in this way is really pretty interesting. I think somebody could probably do this with television video, because one of the big problems we have is there's no real way to look around and find stuff, you know, stuff is going on all the time that we're completely unaware of. And I know you can go on the internet and you can find, like, Radio Tokyo, which I can do here in a second if I find this thing. But what we don't do is we don't have a way to just kind of screw around and find stuff on the planet, which is what this thing allows you to do, which is what makes it so very weird and interesting. Here's Novosibirsk. Anyway, that's the thing. I thought this was a really cool piece of software to show you. Now I'll tell you a little bit about what happened with Voice of America, since you're into this. Shortwave radio was obviously a ridiculous way to transmit stuff, and so when I went to Voice of America, they understood they had to do television, they just didn't understand how to do it, and they wanted to convert from this shortwave radio operation to a global television operation. So they'd gone to ABC News, and ABC quoted them a price of $700 million, which I thought was a lot of money. So I said, you have already, you know, thousands of radio I think they had about 600 radio journalists around the world working for Voice of America, maybe 1,000, and then they're all doing radio with a tape recorder like this. Let's take away the tape recorder and we'll give them a cheap little camera and we'll teach them how to shoot video instead of making radio. And actually they all cut their own radio stuff anyway, so they knew how to edit and they knew how to do stories. So essentially, I got a nice deal with them for a lot less than $700 million, unfortunately. And so I spent the next 2 years teaching these radio journalists all over the world to shoot video. Well, as it turned out, a radio journalist can make video really easily. They know how to find a story. They're not phobic about equipment. They know how to shove a microphone in somebody's face, so they shove a camera in somebody's face. They're used to cutting their own material because they cut their own material by themselves, so why should video be any different? And in 2 years, we went from zero to we built VOA TV, essentially, which is still in business, and I think we trained about 200 or 300 of their journalists and put 200 or 300 cameras around the world in play, feeding Voice of America TV, VOA TV, which you still can't see because of the Smith Act. Maybe you can get it online. Anyway, that turned out so well that then I got hired by Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty to do exactly the same thing. Today, of course, in those days, we had to go out and ship them cameras and microphones and we used to RM450s, I think, to edit in the beginning. Now everybody's got an iPhone. So any print journalism organization that's got 100 or 200 reporters around the world working in radio, for example, or in text, can go to video like that. You can become a CNN in an instant because the phone allows you to shoot and to edit and to do everything else. So the potential is there to completely change your business. And, if you don't like MSNBC, you don't like Fox, start your own, especially if you have journalists already. And this is great for newspapers and magazines. In today's world, there's absolutely no difference between print and radio and television and photography. It's all digital. It's all the same thing. So the potential is there to build stuff. And frankly, if you take that and you marry it to this software, which I think is quite astonishing, you got something really interesting that hasn't been done before. So that's today's lesson. I hope you like it. Meanwhile, I'm going back to listen to, look, TV Camp, Radio Kamchatka. Very interesting. Talk to you later. Bye.